Hello, dear friend. Welcome back to the Sleeping Tones. Tonight, we enter the world of a man who heard silence and transformed it into thunder. A man who lost the very sense that defined his art and yet created music that changed the world forever. Tonight, we walk beside Ludwig van Beethoven, the composer who refused to surrender, the deaf genius who taught sound to speak. So settle into your pillows, let the weight of the day dissolve, and allow yourself to be carried into the story of this extraordinary soul, this revolutionary, this titan who proved that the human spirit cannot be silenced. It is winter in the city of Bonn. The year is 1770. Snow falls softly over the cobblestone streets. The Rhine River flows dark and cold beyond the city walls. Inside a modest apartment on the Bonn Gasse, in a building that still stands today, a child is born. The exact date remains uncertain. What we know is the baptism date, December 17th, 1770. By Catholic tradition, baptism followed birth within 24 hours, so the child was likely born on December 15th or 16th. His parents name him Ludwig van Beethoven, Ludwig after his grandfather. The grandfather was a respected man, Kapellmeister at the court of the Elector of Cologne, a musician of reputation, a figure of dignity. But the grandfather died when young Ludwig was only 3 years old. The child will not remember him. He will know him only through stories, through a portrait that hangs in the family home, through the weight of a name that carries expectation. The father is Johann van Beethoven. He is a tenor in the court chapel. His voice is adequate but not exceptional. He earns a modest salary. He drinks. He drinks more as the years pass. The alcohol becomes a presence in the household, a shadow that darkens every room. The mother is Maria Magdalena Keverich. She is the daughter of a court cook. She married once before, a young man who died shortly after the wedding. Then she married Johann. She is described as quiet, gentle, suffering. She will bear 7 children in total. Only 3 will survive infancy. Ludwig is the second child, the first to live. The apartment on the Bonn Gasse is small, 3 rooms in a building shared with other families. Low ceilings that trap smoke from the stove. Thin walls through which every sound passes. In winter, cold seeps through the windows. The family stuffs rags in the cracks to keep out the wind. In summer, heat traps itself beneath the roof. The rooms become stifling, airless. The family is neither wealthy nor destitute. They occupy that uncertain space between respectability and poverty, where appearances must be maintained even as resources dwindle, where a decent coat must be kept for church even when there is not enough food for the week. Johann recognizes something in his son early on. The boy has an ear for music. He can reproduce melodies after hearing them once. He shows interest in the harpsichord that sits in the corner of the main room. When his father plays, the child watches intently. His small hands reach toward the keys, and Johann, who has not achieved the success he dreamed of, who feels the weight of mediocrity pressing down on him, who sees his father's legacy slipping away, decides that this child will be his redemption. There is a story circulating through Europe, a famous story of a child prodigy in Salzburg, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. By age 6, Mozart was performing for royalty. By age 7, he was touring Europe with his sister. The Mozart family earned money, fame, acclaim. They dined with princes and emperors. And Johann van Beethoven thinks, why not his son? Why should the Beethovens not have their prodigy? Why should Johann not be the father of genius? So the training begins, but it does not begin gently. Johann is not a patient teacher. He is a desperate man, a man whose dreams have curdled into bitterness. A man who drinks to forget his failures and drinks more when he remembers them. He drills the boy for hours, scales up and down the keyboard, exercises that make the small fingers ache, pieces far beyond the child's ability. When Ludwig makes mistakes, Johann shouts. His voice fills the small apartment. Neighbors hear it through the walls. Sometimes he strikes the boy, not brutally, perhaps, but enough to leave marks, enough to teach fear. There are accounts passed down through neighbors and later acquaintances, stories that cannot be fully verified but that paint a consistent picture, stories of Johann waking the child in the middle of the night, pulling him from bed while he is still half asleep, forcing him to play for guests who have stayed late drinking. The boy stumbles to the keyboard, tears on his face, his small hands trembling. He plays. The guests applaud with the enthusiasm of the drunk. Johann smiles. He pours more wine, and the boy learns that music is not joy. It is labor. It is obligation. It is the price of his father's approval and the cost of peace in the household. But something else is also happening beneath the surface of this harsh training. Something Johann does not intend and cannot control. Time 2.0. The boy is learning not just how to play the notes written on the page, but how to hear. He is developing an inner ear, an ability to perceive structure and pattern and possibility. He is absorbing the language of music at a deep level, the grammar of harmony, the syntax of melody, the architecture of form. And despite the harshness of the training, despite the fear and the exhaustion, despite the resentment that must surely be growing inside him, he is falling in love, not with performance, not with the applause of drunken guests, but with the music itself, with the strange magic that happens when sounds combine, with the way a melody can carry feeling that words cannot express, with the architecture of harmony, the way tension resolves into rest. By age 7, Ludwig is performing in public, small concerts at the court, private performances for wealthy patrons. Johann advertises him as age 6. A small lie, a marketing strategy. The boy must seem even more precocious, even more like Mozart. But Ludwig is not Mozart. He does not have Mozart's supernatural fluency. His technique is rough. His performances are sometimes uneven. He is something else, something slower to bloom, something that will require time and suffering and silence to fully emerge. The court at Bonn is small but culturally active. The Elector Maximilian Friedrich is elderly now. He has ruled for decades. He maintains a chapel with professional musicians, an orchestra that performs regularly, a theater that stages operas and plays. Music is valued here. The nobility attend concerts in their finest clothes. Visiting musicians pass through on their way to larger cities. Bonn is not Vienna or Paris or London, but it is not a cultural desert either. And young Ludwig absorbs everything he hears. He hears the court orchestra rehearse in the palace, the sound of strings tuning, the oboes warming up their reeds, the timpani being adjusted. He hears operas performed in the theater, works by Gluck and Gratry and Salieri. He watches from the cheap seats. He studies the scores that his father brings home from the court library. He listens to the church music on Sundays, the masses and motets, the organ preludes that fill the cathedral with sound. And slowly, piece by piece, he begins to understand how music works. Not just the mechanics of playing, but the deeper grammar. The way tension resolves into rest. The way a theme can be transformed through variation. The way form creates expectation and how expectation can be fulfilled or denied. When Ludwig is around 10 years old, something changes. A new organist arrives at the court. His name is Christian Gottlob Neef. Neef is in his early 30s. He is a cultured man. He knows literature and philosophy. He is familiar with the Enlightenment ideas circulating through Europe, the ideas of Rousseau and Voltaire, the belief that reason can improve the world, that education can elevate humanity. Neef hears young Ludwig play, and he recognizes immediately that this child is not merely talented, he is extraordinary, but he also sees that the boy is damaged, withdrawn, moody, quick to anger. He does not make friends easily with other children. He seems older than his years, burdened. Neef understands this. He has seen what Johann's methods have done. He becomes not just a teacher, but a protector. He gives Ludwig access to music that his father would never have shown him. He introduces him to the keyboard works of Johann Sebastian Bach, the Well-Tempered Clavier, 48 preludes and fugues in all the major and minor keys, music of architectural perfection, music that thinks. Ludwig plays through them, slowly at first. His technique is not yet refined enough for the fast movements, but he senses the depth, the logic, the beauty. Bach's music is like a cathedral made of sound. Every note has its place. Every voice has its function. The structure is perfect. And yet within that perfection, there is warmth, humanity, soul. Neef also teaches Ludwig composition, how to write for different instruments, how to structure a movement according to classical principles, how to develop a theme, how to modulate from one key to another. And Ludwig, who has been playing other people's music for years, now begins to create his own. His earliest surviving works date from around 1782 or 1783. He is 11 or 12 years old. They are small pieces, variations on themes by other composers, a few songs with piano accompaniment, nothing revolutionary, nothing that predicts the titan he will become. But they show promise. They show a mind that understands how music is constructed. Neef is impressed enough to arrange for publication. In 1783, Ludwig publishes his first work, a set of keyboard variations on a march by Ernst Christoph Dressler. The title page lists the composer as Louis van Beethoven. Louis, the French version of Ludwig. It is a small gesture toward cosmopolitanism, a hint that this boy from Bonn might someday move beyond the provincial court. Neef writes about his young student in a music magazine. He praises Ludwig's talent. He predicts that the boy will become a second Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart if he continues to develop properly. It is the highest compliment imaginable in the 1780s, but it is also a burden. To be compared to Mozart is to be measured against genius itself, and Ludwig is still just a boy whose childhood has been stolen, a boy whose father drinks more each year and becomes more erratic, a boy whose mother grows quieter and sadder with each passing season, a boy who is learning that the world is neither kind nor fair, but he has music. And music, he is beginning to discover, can contain everything: joy and sorrow, anger and peace, the chaos of his home and the order he craves. It can hold all of it. And so he keeps playing, he keeps composing, he keeps listening, not knowing that one day the listening will be taken from him, not knowing that he will have to create music from memory and imagination alone, not knowing that his silence will speak louder than anyone's sound. In 1784, a significant change occurs. Nephi takes a leave of absence from his position as court organist. He arranges for young Ludwig, now 13, to serve as assistant court organist in his absence. It is an official position with a small salary. Actual responsibility. Ludwig plays for church services. He accompanies rehearsals. He learns the vast repertoire of sacred music. And he learns something else that will serve him for the rest of his life: how to be professional, how to show up even when tired, how to perform even when the inner world is turbulent, how to separate the work from the emotion. The following year, the Elector Maximilian Friedrich dies. His successor is Maximilian Franz, the youngest son of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. Maximilian Franz is more progressive than his predecessor. He expands the court orchestra. He brings in new musicians. He encourages new music. Under his patronage, Bonn's cultural life flourishes, and young Beethoven benefits. He meets traveling musicians who pass through the court. He hears new works. He is exposed to the latest developments in Viennese classical style. By 1787, Ludwig has saved enough money for a journey he has been dreaming about: a trip to Vienna, the city of Mozart and Haydn, the capital of the musical world. His father approves of the plan. The court grants him leave. Maximilian Franz writes a letter of introduction. And in the spring of 1787, Ludwig travels to Vienna for the first time. He is 16 years old. The journey takes weeks. By coach over rough roads, through forests that seem endless, past villages where people speak dialects he can barely understand, through cities where church spires pierce the sky. He travels with the excitement of youth and the nervousness of someone leaving home for the first time. He arrives in Vienna overwhelmed. The city is vast compared to Bonn. Streets teem with people, carriages and horses and vendors calling out their wares. Palaces rise like mountains. The architecture is grand, Baroque facades covered in statues and gilt. Music is everywhere. In churches where organs thunder, in theaters where operas are staged nightly, in private salons where the wealthy gather to hear the latest compositions, in public squares where street musicians play for coins. And somewhere in this city is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the legend, the genius, the man whose name has haunted Ludwig's entire childhood. There is a tradition passed down through multiple sources that Beethoven met Mozart during this visit. The details are uncertain. No one recorded the meeting at the time. No letters mention it. No diary entries confirm it. But decades later, people who knew Beethoven repeated the story. According to this tradition, Ludwig was brought to Mozart's apartment. He was asked to play something. He played competently, but nervously. Mozart was polite but not particularly impressed. Many young musicians came to play for him. This one seemed no different. Then Ludwig asked if he might improvise on a theme that Mozart would provide. Mozart gave him a theme, a simple melodic idea, and Ludwig began to play. He took the theme and developed it. He transformed it through variations. He built harmonic structures that were not mere decoration, but genuine exploration. He played with imagination and freedom. And Mozart, who had been half listening while attending to something else, stopped what he was doing. He walked to the door of the adjoining room where friends were gathered, and he said, or so the story goes, "Pay attention to this one. Someday, he will give the world something to talk about." It is a beautiful story. It may even be true. There is no reason to completely disbelieve it. Mozart did receive young musicians. Beethoven was in Vienna at the right time. The story appears in multiple sources, but we cannot know for certain. What we do know with certainty is that Beethoven's time in Vienna was cut short. A letter arrives from Bonn. Urgent news. His mother is gravely ill. He must return immediately. He leaves Vienna after only 2 weeks. All his hopes for study with the great masters will have to wait. He travels back through the same roads, the same forests, the same villages. But now, there is no excitement, only dread. He knows what awaits him. He arrives home in July. His mother is dying. Maria Magdalena van Beethoven has tuberculosis. Consumption, they call it. The disease that consumes the body from within. She is 40 years old. She's been coughing for months, blood on her handkerchief. Now she can barely breathe. Her chest rattles with every inhalation. Ludwig sits beside her bed. He holds her thin hand. The room smells of sickness and the herbs that do nothing to help. She dies on July 17th, 1787. He will later describe her as his best friend, the only person in his childhood who loved him without condition, who never struck him, who never demanded impossible things, who simply loved him. And now she is gone. Johann collapses completely into alcoholism. He can no longer fulfill his duties at the court. He shows up to rehearsals drunk. He forgets his parts. He creates scenes. He is eventually removed from his position. A small pension is granted, but the court stipulates that it be paid directly to Ludwig, not to Johann. They do not trust the father with money. At 17 years old, Ludwig becomes the head of the household. He must support his 2 younger brothers, Caspar Karl and Nikolaus Johann. He must manage the family finances, pay the rent, buy food, make sure his brothers have clothes and shoes. He must endure his father's drunken rages and long absences when Johann disappears for days. He gives piano lessons to children of wealthy families. He plays in the court orchestra. He takes on any work that will bring in money. And he composes when he can, late at night after his brothers are asleep. Early in the morning before the household wakes, stealing moments, fragments of time, and he waits. He waits for the moment when he can leave, when he can escape Bonn and the memories, the weight of obligation, the ghost of his mother, the ruin of his father. He waits for nearly 5 years. In 1792, the moment finally arrives. The Elector Maximilian Franz agrees to sponsor Ludwig's return to Vienna. He will study with Joseph Haydn, the most celebrated composer in Europe. He will develop his craft, and if he succeeds, he will bring honor to Bonn. The court grants him a modest stipend, enough to live on if he is careful. In November 1792, Ludwig leaves his hometown forever. He is 21 years old. He packs his few possessions, his music manuscripts, his clothes, a miniature portrait of his mother that he will keep for the rest of his life. He boards the coach that will take him to Vienna. His brothers see him off. His father is too drunk to come. The coach pulls away. Ludwig watches Bonn recede into the distance. The church spires, the city walls, the Rhine River, he will never return. Vienna in 1792 is the center of the musical universe. Joseph Haydn, now 60 years old, is the most celebrated composer in Europe. His symphonies and string quartets have defined the classical style. He has patrons throughout the continent. He is famous, wealthy, respected. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart died the previous year, December 5th, 1791. He was only 35 years old. The city mourns him still. His operas are performed in the theaters. His Requiem, unfinished at his death, is completed by his student Süssmayr and performed to great emotion. But the city also hungers for the next great composer. Who will fill the void that Mozart left? Beethoven arrives in Vienna with letters of introduction. He arrives with a reputation as a virtuoso pianist. He arrives with ambition burning inside him like a furnace. His lessons with Haydn begin almost immediately, but they do not go well. Haydn is elderly. He is busy with his own work and his own patrons. He has commissions and obligations that take up most of his time. He does not have the energy to give Beethoven the intensive attention the young man craves. He assigns exercises in counterpoint, standard exercises from textbooks. Write a two-part invention in the style of Bach. Harmonize this chorale melody. Beethoven completes them dutifully, but Haydn barely looks at them. He does not catch errors. He does not offer detailed feedback. He marks them quickly and moves on to the next. Beethoven grows frustrated. He did not travel all this way to work through exercises unsupervised. He begins to study secretly with other teachers. He does not tell Haydn. He simply arranges lessons on the side. Johann Georg Albrechtsberger, a specialist in counterpoint and a teacher at St. Stephen's Cathedral. Albrechtsberger is strict, methodical. He makes Beethoven work through hundreds of exercises, species counterpoint, fugue, canon, all the techniques of polyphonic writing. It is tedious work, but Beethoven applies himself. He knows that mastery requires discipline. He also studies with Antonio Salieri, the imperial Kapellmeister. Salieri teaches him how to set Italian text, how to make the music serve the words, how to write for the human voice. Years later, when people spread false rumors that Salieri poisoned Mozart out of jealousy, Beethoven will defend him. He will say that Salieri was a generous teacher who asked for nothing in return. Beethoven is hungry to learn everything. He studies the scores of Haydn and Mozart and Bach. He takes them apart. He analyzes how they work, how the themes are developed, how the forms are structured, how the orchestration creates color. He learns the rules so thoroughly that he will later know exactly how to break them. But he does not rely on study alone. He also performs, and it is through performance that he makes his name in Vienna. Vienna's aristocracy loves music. They host salons in their palaces, private concerts where invited guests gather to hear the finest musicians. They compete to employ the best performers and composers. They spend vast sums on their musical establishments. And Beethoven, with his wild dark hair and his intense eyes, with his powerful hands and his fearless improvisations, becomes a sensation. He plays in the palace of Prince Karl Lichnowsky. Lichnowsky is a cultured man in his late 30s. He was a patron of Mozart before Mozart's death. He recognizes Beethoven's genius immediately. The young man's playing is unlike anything he has heard. Technically brilliant, yes, but also emotionally direct. When Beethoven plays, he is not performing. He is revealing himself. Lichnowsky offers Beethoven an apartment in his palace, rooms of his own, a piano. He gives him a generous annual allowance, 600 florins. More than enough to live comfortably. He introduces him to other aristocrats. To Countess Maria Wilhelmine von Thun, a wealthy patroness who hosts musical evenings. To Prince Franz Joseph Maximilian Lobkowitz, who maintains his own orchestra. To Archduke Rudolph, the youngest son of Emperor Leopold II. Rudolph is still a boy when they first meet, but he is musical and intelligent. Over the years, he will become one of Beethoven's most important patrons and one of his few genuine friends. These aristocrats are dazzled by Beethoven, not just by his technical skill, though that is formidable, but by something else, by the ferocity of his playing, by the emotional depth, by the sense that when Beethoven sits at the piano, something essential is being communicated, something true. His improvisations become legendary. He sits at the piano and creates entire worlds in real time. Someone gives him a theme, a simple melody, a tune someone hums, and Beethoven takes it and transforms it. He develops it through variations, simple at first, then increasingly complex. He modulates through distant keys. He builds to climaxes that leave audiences breathless. The piano sings. It thunders. It whispers. And when he finishes, the room is silent for a moment before applause erupts. People recognize that they have witnessed something extraordinary. But Beethoven is not easy to like as a person. He is moody. He is arrogant. He insults people without thinking. He does not flatter. He does not bow and scrape before nobility the way musicians are expected to. One evening at a salon, he is asked to play. He refuses. The host is offended. Beethoven says, "I will not be treated like a servant." It is shocking. Musicians in the 1790s occupy a subordinate position. They are employees. They are expected to be grateful, deferential, humble. They perform when asked. They do not refuse, but Beethoven believes something radical. He truly believes that artists are the equals of aristocrats. That genius confers its own nobility, that he owes respect to those who respect him, but he owes servility to no one. It is a revolutionary idea, and some aristocrats are deeply offended. They complain about his rudeness, but others, the ones who recognize his gift, tolerate his behavior. They make excuses. They say, "That is just Beethoven. You have to understand him. He is not like other musicians. They support him because his music is worth the difficulty. In 1795, Beethoven performs his first public concert in Vienna. Not a salon performance for invited guests, but a ticketed concert open to the public. He plays one of his own piano concertos, probably the Piano Concerto No. 2 in B-flat major, Opus 19. Though it is called No. 2, it was actually written before what would become No. 1. The numbering came later, based on publication order rather than composition date. The audience is enthusiastic. Critics praise him. They say that his playing combines technical brilliance with profound expression, that his compositions show both mastery of form and originality of thought. Beethoven is establishing himself not just as a pianist, but as a composer to be taken seriously. His early works begin to be published. Piano trios. The 3 trios of Opus 1, dedicated to Prince Lichnowsky. Violin sonatas. The 3 sonatas of Opus 12, piano sonatas. The first 3 sonatas, Opus 2, dedicated to Joseph Haydn. The piano sonata in C minor, Opus 13, later nicknamed the Pathétique. It is dramatic, stormy. The opening is marked, grave, serious, and slow. Crashing chords. Dramatic pauses. Then it explodes into an allegro of passionate intensity. The slow movement is heartbreakingly beautiful. A simple melody over a steady accompaniment, it is the kind of melody that stays with you, that haunts you. People recognize that this is not merely competent music. This is music with a voice, a distinct, powerful, individual voice. By the end of the 1790s, Beethoven is famous in Vienna. He is invited to perform in other cities. Prague, where his music is enthusiastically received. Berlin, where he plays for the King of Prussia. Budapest, where Hungarian nobles host him. Publishers compete for his works. Aristocrats offer him commissions for new pieces. He is financially secure for the first time in his life. He lives in his own apartment now, no longer dependent on Lichnowsky's hospitality, though they remain friends. He can afford nice clothes, good wine, dinners at the best restaurants. He has servants who clean his rooms and do his laundry. He has a piano in his apartment, a fine instrument. He has time to compose without worrying about money. Everything he dreamed of in Bonn has come true. He is successful, celebrated, financially comfortable. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, something begins to go wrong. It starts with a ringing in his ears, a high-pitched hum that does not go away. It is faint at first. He notices it only in quiet moments, at night when he is trying to sleep, or in the morning before the city wakes. He ignores it. He thinks it will pass. Perhaps he has been to too many loud concerts. Perhaps he has been working too hard. Perhaps it is nothing. But it does not pass. By 1800, the ringing is constant. And now, there is something else. He has trouble hearing high notes. When someone plays the upper register of the piano, the sound seems muffled. When someone speaks softly, he must ask them to repeat themselves. In noisy rooms, conversations become difficult to follow. Multiple voices talking at once blur into an incomprehensible wash of sound. He begins to avoid social gatherings. He tells people he is busy with work. He says he prefers solitude for composing, but the truth is, he is afraid. Afraid that someone will notice. Afraid that they will realize he is not hearing properly. afraid that the one thing he cannot afford to lose is slipping away. He consults doctors. Vienna has many physicians, some reputable, some less so. They examine him. They ask questions about his symptoms. They offer theories. One says it is a digestive problem. The ears are connected to the stomach through invisible channels. Fix the digestion and the ears will heal. Another blames inflammation of the inner ear. Another suggests it is a consequence of his nervous temperament. They prescribe treatments. Almond oil drops in the ears twice daily. Cold baths to stimulate the nerves. Herbal tinctures that taste vile. Electrical stimulation using primitive devices that deliver painful shocks. None of it works. The condition worsens steadily. By 1801, Beethoven can no longer deny the reality. He is going deaf. The word itself is almost unthinkable. A deaf composer. It is like a blind painter, a mute poet, a lame dancer, an impossibility, a cruel joke. And yet it is happening to him. He writes to a childhood friend, Franz Wegeler, who is now a physician. He confesses everything. He describes the symptoms in detail, the constant ringing, the difficulty hearing conversations, the way high frequencies are disappearing. He describes his fear, his desperation. He writes, "I must live like an exile. If I approach near to people, a hot terror seizes upon me, since I fear being placed in the danger of letting my condition be noticed." He cannot bear to tell people. He cannot bear the pity, the whispered conversations, the way people would look at him differently, the way opportunities would dry up. So he hides it. He avoids conversations where possible. He pretends not to hear when it is convenient. He nods and smiles, even when he has not caught what was said. He becomes more difficult, more isolated, more volatile. Friends notice the change. They do not understand it. They think he is becoming eccentric. They think success has made him arrogant. They do not know that inside he is drowning. In 1802, on the advice of a doctor, Beethoven moves to Heiligenstadt. It is a small village outside Vienna, about an hour's journey by carriage, quiet, rural, surrounded by fields and vineyards. The doctor believes that rest and fresh air might help, that removing himself from the noise and stress of the city might slow the progression of the hearing loss. Beethoven rents a small house. He walks in the countryside, long walks through the fields. He tries to compose. He works on the Symphony No. 2 in D major, Opus 36. It is a bright, energetic work. No one listening to it would guess at the composer's inner turmoil. But the silence is closing in. One day, he is walking with a friend, a musician from Vienna who has come to visit. They are walking through a meadow. The friend stops suddenly. He says, "Listen, do you hear that?" A shepherd is playing a flute in a distant field, a simple folk melody carrying across the open space. The friend comments on how beautiful it is. Beethoven hears nothing. He stares in the direction his friend is, pointing. He sees the shepherd, a tiny figure in the distance. But he cannot hear the flute. The realization is devastating. The higher frequencies are already lost to him completely. He returns to his house, and on October 6th, 1802, he writes a document that will become one of the most famous letters in music history, the Heiligenstadt Testament. It is addressed to his brothers, Caspar Karl and Nicholas Johann, But it is also something more, a confession, a justification, a farewell, an explanation for his behavior. He begins by asking them to forgive him for seeming cold and misanthropic. He explains that for 6 years he has been afflicted with an incurable condition. He writes about his deafness with raw honesty. "O you men who think or declare me to be hostile, morose, or misanthropic, how unjust you are, and how little you know the secret cause of what appears thus to you." He describes his anguish. "How could I possibly admit an infirmity in the one sense which ought to be more perfect in me than in others? A sense which I once possessed in the highest perfection, a perfection such as few in my profession enjoy or ever have enjoyed." He writes about contemplating suicide. "Little more, and I would have put an end to my life. Only art held me back. It seemed to me impossible to leave the world before I had produced all the works that I felt the urge to compose." He writes that he has lived without joy for years, that he has avoided people to hide his affliction, that he has become resigned to his fate. He instructs his brothers to make his condition known after his death, so that the world may be reconciled to him. He writes with the knowledge that he may not live much longer, that the despair may overwhelm him. But he also writes with determination. He will endure. He will continue. He will create the music that is inside him. He seals the document. He does not send it. It will be found among his papers after his death, 25 years later. But something shifts in him after writing it. A decision is made. He will live, not despite the deafness, but through it. He will compose anyway. He will create music that exists not in the physical world of vibrating air, but in the interior space of imagination and memory. He will become the music, and the music will become him. He returns to Vienna, and he begins the most productive period of his life. The years after Heiligenstadt are the years when Beethoven transforms music forever. Scholars call this period the heroic period. It begins around 1803. It lasts roughly a decade. And in those 10 years, Beethoven creates a body of work that changes what music can be, what music can express, what music can mean. He begins work on a symphony, his third. He conceives it on a grand scale, longer than any symphony yet written, more complex in its structure, more ambitious in its emotional scope. He dedicates it, at least initially, to Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon is the hero of the age. He rose from obscurity to lead France, a man of the people who defeated empires built on hereditary privilege. He brought the ideals of the French Revolution to Europe: liberty, equality, fraternity. He reformed legal codes. He promoted based on merit rather than birth. Beethoven admires him. He sees in Napoleon a symbol of individual greatness triumphing over the old aristocratic order. He writes Bonaparte on the title page of the score. But in May 1804, news reaches Vienna. Napoleon has declared himself Emperor of France. He has had himself crowned in Notre Dame Cathedral with a crown designed to echo those of ancient Rome. Beethoven is furious. He shouts, now he too will trample on all human rights. He will become a tyrant. He will think of himself as above all other humans. He takes the score. He scratches out Napoleon's name so violently that he tears through the page. The symphony is renamed Sinfonia Eroica, Heroic Symphony. It is dedicated not to a man, but to the idea of heroism itself. The Eroica Symphony premieres in April 1805. It is performed at the Theater an der Wien. From the first notes, the audience knows that something unprecedented is happening. The symphony is enormous. The first movement alone is longer than entire symphonies by Haydn. It begins with two massive chords. Then the main theme enters in the cellos, simple at first, but Beethoven develops it relentlessly. He takes it apart. He transforms it. He builds it into towering structures of sound. The development section is vast. It ventures into distant keys. It creates tension that seems unbearable. The second movement is a funeral march of shattering intensity. It is marked Marcia Funebre, funeral march. The music trudges forward with the weight of grief. The orchestra builds to climaxes of almost unbearable power. Then it subsides into fragments, as if the very fabric of the music is coming apart. The third movement is a scherzo. Scherzo means joke, but there is nothing light about this music. It is wild, propulsive, relentless. The hunting horns leap and call. The energy is volcanic. The finale is a set of variations on a theme Beethoven had used before in other works. But now he transforms it into something transcendent. The variations grow, increasingly complex. The music builds to a conclusion of overwhelming triumph. When the symphony ends, the audience does not know how to react. Some applaud enthusiastically, others sit in confused silence. The work is too long, too strange, too demanding. One critic writes that the symphony is a daring and wild fantasy that goes on far too long. Another says that it contains too many ideas and that the funeral march is inappropriate for a symphony. But others recognize its significance. They understand that they have witnessed a revolution. Beethoven has taken the classical symphony, the form perfected by Haydn and Mozart, and exploded it from within. He has shown that a symphony can carry emotional and philosophical weight, that it can express struggle and triumph, that it can be personal and universal at the same time. Over the next few years, Beethoven composes with astonishing speed and fertility. Works pour from him as if a dam has broken, as if the decision to live, made in Heiligenstadt, has unleashed a creative force that cannot be contained. He writes piano sonatas that push the instrument to its limits. The Waldstein Sonata, Opus 53 in C major, named for his patron Count Ferdinand von Waldstein. It is brilliant, virtuosic, filled with cascading passages that shimmer like water. The final movement, marked Prestissimo, is a perpetual motion that builds to an ecstatic conclusion. The Appassionata Sonata, Opus 57 in F minor, dark, stormy, passionate. Beethoven himself said it was one of his greatest piano sonatas. The first movement churns with barely controlled fury. The second movement is a set of variations, calm but ominous. The finale erupts in a whirlwind of 16th notes, relentless and overwhelming. The Violin Concerto in D major, Opus 61. It is lyrical, expansive, meditative. The violin sings melodies of heartbreaking beauty over a shimmering orchestral accompaniment. The timpani begins with 5 soft repeated notes, a rhythmic motif that will recur throughout the movement like a heartbeat. The solo violin enters with a melody that seems to float above the orchestra. It is not about virtuoso display, though the technical demands are considerable. It is about song, about a singing line that carries the listener into a state of contemplation. The slow movement is one of the most beautiful things Beethoven ever wrote. The violin plays long, sustained melodies over gentle orchestral accompaniment. Time seems to suspend. The finale is lighter, more playful, but still touched with the depth that characterizes all of Beethoven's mature work. Piano Concerto No. 4 in G major, Opus 58. It opens with a radical gesture. The piano enters alone, playing a simple, gentle phrase. Then the orchestra responds. This had never been done before. Concertos always began with the orchestra. The soloists entered later, but Beethoven reverses the expectation. The slow movement is a dialogue between the piano and the orchestra. The orchestra plays stern, dramatic phrases. The piano responds with gentle, pleading melodies. It is like a conversation between force and gentleness, between fate and the human soul. Piano Concerto No. 5 in E-flat major, Opus 73. Later nicknamed the Emperor Concerto, Beethoven never called it that. The nickname was applied by a publisher decades later, but it fits. The music is majestic, powerful, heroic. The piano part is virtuosic, but never merely flashy. Every note serves the musical argument. Symphony No. 5 in C minor, Opus 67. Perhaps the most famous symphony ever written. It begins with 4 notes, 3 short, 1 long, da-da-da-dak, the rhythm of fate knocking at the door, or so Beethoven reportedly told a student. The entire symphony grows from these 4 notes. They appear in every movement, transformed, developed, but always recognizable. The symphony is a journey from darkness to light, from C minor to C major, from struggle to triumph. The first movement is tense, dramatic, relentless. The second movement is a theme and variations, calmer but still serious. The third movement is a scherzo that emerges from shadow. And then, without pause, the music breaks into the finale. The finale is an explosion of joy. C major blazing in the full orchestra. Trumpets that were silent in the earlier movements now proclaim victory. Timpani thunder. The entire orchestra surges forward. It is triumph, pure, absolute triumph. Beethoven also composes an opera during these years. It is the only opera he will complete, though he will revise it obsessively. Fidelio, originally titled Leonore. The story is about a woman named Leonore who disguises herself as a man named Fidelio. She takes a job as a prison guard to rescue her husband Florestan, who has been unjustly imprisoned. It is a story about freedom, about justice, about married love conquering tyranny. Beethoven struggles with the opera more than with any other work. He finds it difficult to write for voices, to subordinate music to drama. He revises it repeatedly. The first version premieres in 1805. It is performed only 3 times. The audience does not respond well. Beethoven revises it, cutting several numbers, tightening the structure. The second version premieres in 1806. Better. Received, but still not a success. Beethoven quarrels with the theater management and withdraws the work. He will revise it one final time in 1814, and this version will finally succeed. But the struggle leaves him exhausted and convinced that opera is not his natural medium. He will never complete another one, despite considering many opera projects over the remaining years of his life. The premiere of the 5th and 6th symphonies takes place in December 1808 at the Theater in der Wien. It is part of a marathon concert that also includes the Fourth Piano Concerto, parts of the Mass in C, and other works. The concert lasts over 4 hours. The theater is freezing. It is winter and there is inadequate heat. The audience sits in their coats, breath visible in the cold air. The orchestra is under-rehearsed. Mistakes occur, but they are witnessing history. The creation of two of the greatest symphonies ever written premiered on the same night. Symphony No. 6 in F major, Opus 68. The Pastoral Symphony, a complete contrast to the Fifth. Where the Fifth is dramatic and heroic, the Sixth is peaceful and contemplative. It evokes the countryside. The movements have descriptive titles. Awakening of cheerful feelings on arrival in the countryside. Scene by the brook. Merry gathering of country folk. Thunderstorm. Shepherd's song. Cheerful and thankful feelings after the storm. It is program music. Music that tells a story or paints a picture, but it never becomes literal. Beethoven wrote on the score, more the expression of feeling than painting. He is not trying to imitate bird calls or thunderstorms. He is trying to capture the feeling of being in nature, the peace, the joy, the connection to something larger than the human world. The second movement includes suggestions of bird calls, nightingale, quail, cuckoo, but they are woven into the musical fabric. They are part of the texture, not interruptions. The storm movement is dramatic. Lightning strikes represented by piccolo shrieks, thunder in the timpani, but it passes. And the final movement is a shepherd's song of thanksgiving, a simple hymn-like melody, gratitude for the beauty of the world. He also writes chamber music during these years. The Triple Concerto in C major, Opus 56, for piano, violin, cello, and orchestra. An unusual combination that creates opportunities for intimate dialogue between the three soloists. String quartets continue to pour from his pen. The three Razumovsky quartets, Opus 59, commissioned by Count Razumovsky, the Russian ambassador to Vienna. These quartets are longer and more complex than anything written before. They incorporate Russian themes at the Count's request, but they are unmistakably Beethoven. The Harp Quartet, Opus 74 in E-flat major, nicknamed for the pizzicato passages that sound harp-like. The Serioso Quartet, Opus 95 in F minor, intense and concentrated. And songs, always songs. Beethoven continues to set German texts throughout his life. He writes song cycles, individual songs, folk song arrangements. The song cycle An die Ferngeliebte, To the Distant Beloved, Opus 98. 6 songs that flow into one another without pause. A meditation on love and separation and memory. It is one of the first true song cycles, influencing Schubert and Schumann after him. And through all of this extraordinary creativity, Beethoven is losing his hearing. By 1808, he can barely hear the orchestra when conducting. He must rely on visual cues. He watches the musicians' bows moving. He watches the conductor's gestures. He imagines the sound based on what he knows should be happening. By 1810, he can no longer perform in public as a pianist. His playing has become erratic. He cannot hear the dynamics. He cannot balance the different voices. He hammers the keys, breaking strings. He plays too loudly because he cannot hear himself. He must rely on others to tell him if he is too loud or too soft. In conversations, people must shout. They must repeat themselves multiple times. Simple conversations become exhausting. He begins carrying small notebooks so people can write down what they want to say. These conversation books survive, hundreds of them. They are a strange, one-sided dialogue. We see what others wrote to him. Questions, comments, bits of gossip. We do not see his spoken responses, but we can imagine them. He is isolated, trapped inside his own head, surrounded by people but unable to communicate naturally. And yet the music keeps coming, richer, deeper, more profound than ever, as if the silence is not a barrier but a gateway, as if by losing external sound he has gained access to a deeper level of musical thought. Beethoven's personal life during these years is turbulent and often painful. He never marries. He falls in love repeatedly, passionately, desperately. But his relationships are complicated, intense, often doomed from the start. There is Giulietta Guicciardi, a young aristocrat, a countess, who studies piano with him. She is beautiful, charming, talented. She is 17 years old when they meet. Beethoven is 30. He falls in love with her. He dedicates to her the Piano Sonata in C-sharp minor, Opus 27 No. 2. Later, it will be nicknamed the Moonlight Sonata. The sonata's first movement is famous worldwide. A slow, haunting meditation in C-sharp minor. The left hand plays a steady triplet rhythm like a heartbeat. The right hand sings a melody of quiet anguish over it. It is nocturnal, introspective, infinitely sad. Beethoven himself called it sonata quasi una fantasia, sonata in the manner of a fantasy. The nickname Moonlight was applied decades later by a German poet and music critic named Ludwig van. He said the music reminded him of moonlight shimmering on Lake Lucerne. The name stuck. But Giulietta does not return Beethoven's affections. Or perhaps she does, briefly. But her family will not allow the relationship. She is a countess. He is a commoner, a musician. The marriage would be impossible. She marries someone else. A count of appropriate rank and fortune. Beethoven is heartbroken. There is Josephine Brunswick, also a countess. Intelligent, cultured, sympathetic to Beethoven's genius. Beethoven gives her piano lessons. He falls deeply in love with her. She is recently widowed. She has 4 young children. She depends on her family's financial support. A marriage to Beethoven, a commoner, would mean losing that support. She would be cut off, impoverished. Her children would suffer. She writes him letters that suggest real affection. She clearly cares for him. But she cannot commit to a relationship that would destroy her life and her children's futures. She eventually marries another aristocrat, a safe, appropriate choice. Beethoven is devastated. And there is the mystery of the immortal beloved. In July 1812, Beethoven writes a passionate love letter. It is addressed to an unnamed woman. He calls her my immortal beloved. The letter is never sent. It is found among his papers after his death. He wrote it while staying in Teplitz, a spa town in Bohemia. He writes, my angel, my all, my very self. Only a few words today, and at that, with pencil, with yours. Not till tomorrow will my lodgings be definitely determined upon. What a useless waste of time. He writes about longing and separation. Why this deep sorrow when necessity speaks? Can our love endure except through sacrifices, through not demanding everything? Can you change the fact that you are not wholly mine, I not wholly yours? He writes, be calm, love me. Today, yesterday, what tearful longings for you. You, my life, my all, farewell. Oh, continue to love me. Never misjudge the most faithful heart of your beloved. Ever thine, ever mine, ever ours. The identity of the immortal beloved has been debated for 2 centuries. Scholars have proposed numerous candidates. Some believe it was Josephine Brunswick. Others propose Antoni Brentano, a married woman who was a friend and patron. Still others suggest different women from Beethoven's circle. Some recent scholarship leans toward Josephine or Antony, but we will never know for certain. Beethoven left no other clue. But the letter reveals something essential about him. He was capable of profound love. He longed for connection, for partnership, for domestic happiness. He dreamed of a life shared with someone who understood him, but circumstances conspired against him. His deafness made social interaction difficult. His temperament made him challenging to live with. His social position as a commoner made marriage to aristocratic women impossible, and so he remained alone. In 1815, Beethoven's brother Caspar Karl dies of tuberculosis. He is only 39 years old. He leaves behind a widow, Johanna, and a young son named Karl. Karl is 9 years old. Caspar. Karl's will names both Beethoven and Johanna as co-guardians of the boy. Beethoven is outraged by this arrangement. He despises Johanna. Years earlier, she had been convicted of theft and adultery. She has a difficult reputation in Vienna. Beethoven believes she is morally unfit to raise the boy. He goes to court demanding sole custody. He argues that Karl needs proper education, moral guidance, protection from his mother's corrupting influence. A legal battle ensues that will last years. The courts initially grant Beethoven guardianship based on his status and reputation, but Johanna appeals. She fights for her son. The case drags on through multiple courts. Beethoven becomes obsessed with the case. He writes letter after letter to the authorities. He hires lawyers. He testifies in court. He argues passionately that Karl must be saved from his mother. The stress affects his health and his work. Finally, in 1820, Beethoven wins. He becomes Karl's legal guardian. Johanna is allowed only supervised visits, but the victory is hollow. Karl is a teenager now. He resents being torn from his mother. He resents Beethoven's controlling behavior. Beethoven wants him to study at the best schools. He wants him to excel academically. He wants him to become a scholar or perhaps a musician like his uncle. Karl wants none of this. He is an ordinary boy with ordinary interests. He wants to be a soldier. He finds his uncle suffocating. The relationship is fraught with conflict. Beethoven reads Karl's mail. He questions his friends. He sets strict rules. He alternates between affection and anger. Karl rebels in small ways. He lies about where he goes. He sneaks out to see his mother despite the court order. He performs poorly in school. In 1826, the situation reaches a crisis. Karl attempts suicide. He is 19 years old. He goes into the countryside outside Vienna. He shoots himself in the head with a pistol. But the bullet grazes his skull without penetrating. He survives. A peasant finds him and brings him to a hospital. He recovers physically, though he will carry a scar for the rest of his life. The incident devastates Beethoven. He blames himself. He realizes that his love, however genuine, has been oppressive, that he has failed the boy he was trying to save. Karl eventually joins the army, which is what he wanted all along. He will survive Beethoven by decades. He will marry and have children, but the relationship with his uncle never fully heals. Years later, people will ask Karl about Beethoven. He will speak of him with respect, but not with warmth. He will say that Beethoven meant well but did not understand him. By 1820, Beethoven is completely deaf, utterly, totally deaf. He cannot hear a single note. He cannot hear his own voice when he speaks. He shouts without realizing how loud he is. He whispers when he thinks he is speaking at normal volume. In the street, he does not hear approaching carriages. Friends must pull him aside to prevent accidents. At concerts of his own music, he cannot hear the orchestra. He can only watch the conductor, watch the musicians' movements, and try to imagine the sounds based on his knowledge of the score. He withdraws from public life almost entirely. He lives in a series of apartments in Vienna. He moves frequently. Landlords grow tired of his eccentricities, his strange hours. His pacing at night, the way he pounds on the piano even though he cannot hear it. His rooms are chaotic. Papers everywhere, manuscripts stacked on every surface. Empty bottles from the wine he drinks too much of. Dusty furniture. He does not keep regular hours. He composes at night. He sleeps during the day. He walks long distances through the countryside around Vienna, muttering to himself, waving his arms as if conducting. People who see him think he is mad. Perhaps in a way he is, but he is also doing something no composer has ever done before. He is composing entirely from internal hearing. He hears the music in his mind. Every note, every chord, every orchestral color, he hears it as clearly as if it were being performed. He writes it down, and when it is performed, it is perfect. The musicians can play what he has written. The harmonies work. The orchestration is effective. How is this possible? Some would say it is genius, the gift of a mind that operates on a level beyond normal human ability. Others might say it is craft, the result of decades of study and practice. That Beethoven knows music so thoroughly that he can construct it mentally without needing to hear it physically. But perhaps it is something else as well. Perhaps deafness liberated him in some strange way. Perhaps, by losing external sound, he gained access to a deeper level of musical thought. He is no longer constrained by what is physically possible to hear. He can imagine sounds that blend in ways that would be muddy in reality. He can write dissonances that would be unbearable to a hearing person, but which, in the mind, resolve perfectly. He is writing music for the inner ear, music that exists in the realm of pure idea. In 1824, Beethoven completes his Symphony No. 9 in D minor, Opus 125. It is his longest symphony, his most ambitious, his final symphony, though he does not know that yet. The first three movements follow traditional symphonic structure: a dramatic first movement, a lively scherzo that he places second instead of third, a slow, deeply felt third movement, but the fourth movement is revolutionary. It includes voices. A solo quartet of soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. and a full chorus. They sing a setting of Friedrich Schiller's poem, Ode to Joy. Schiller wrote the poem in 1785 as a celebration of universal brotherhood. The text envisions a world where all people are united in joy and love, where barriers of class and nation dissolve, where humanity recognizes its common bond. Beethoven had wanted to set this poem since his youth. He carried the idea with him for decades. Now, in his 50s, deaf, isolated, lonely, he finally does it. The finale begins with a harsh discord. The orchestra erupts in chaos. Then the cellos and basses enter with a recitative-like melody, instrumental voices speaking. Fragments of the earlier movements return, each rejected. Then the famous theme appears, the Ode to Joy melody. Simple, almost hymn-like. The cellos and basses play it softly. Then the violas join. Then the second violins. Then the full orchestra. The theme grows, it builds, it transforms. Then the harsh discord returns, and a bass soloist sings, "Oh friends, not these tones. Let us sing something more pleasant, more full of joy." And the chorus enters, singing Schiller's text. Joy, beautiful spark of the gods, daughter of Elysium. We enter drunk with fire, heavenly one, into your sanctuary. Your magic binds again what custom has strictly parted. All people become brothers where your gentle wing rests. The music builds through increasingly complex variations. The chorus and soloists weave intricate counterpoint. The orchestra surges beneath them. By the end, the entire ensemble is singing together. It is overwhelming, triumphant, transcendent. The premiere takes place on May 7th, 1824, at the Unwind Artner Tortheater in Vienna. The theater is packed. The audience includes aristocrats, musicians, ordinary Viennese citizens, people who have followed Beethoven's career for decades, people who remember hearing him play piano in his youth. Beethoven insists on conducting, even though he cannot hear, even though everyone knows it is impossible. He stands before the orchestra, beating time with exaggerated gestures. The real conductor, Michael Umlauf, stands behind him, giving the actual cues to the musicians. The orchestra follows Umlauf, not Beethoven. But Beethoven conducts empty air, his arms moving with fierce intensity. When the symphony ends, the audience erupts. Applause, cheers, people weeping openly. But Beethoven does not hear it. He stands facing the orchestra, unaware of the ovation behind him. One of the soloists, the contralto Caroline Unger, walks over to him. She gently takes his arm and turns him around to face the audience. And Beethoven sees them. Hundreds of people on their feet, waving hats and handkerchiefs, clapping until their hands hurt. He sees their mouths open in shouts he cannot hear. He sees tears on their faces. And he understands. They are honoring him, celebrating him, recognizing what he has given them. He bows, and the applause continues. It is one of the greatest moments in music history, and he experiences it in silence. After the Ninth Symphony, Beethoven returns to more intimate forms. He composes his final piano sonatas, Opus 109 in E major, Opus 110 in a flat major, Opus 111 in C minor. Each is introspective, meditative, searching. They are not public music meant to dazzle audiences. They are private conversations, Beethoven exploring the limits of what the piano can express. The final movement of Opus 111 is a set of variations on a simple theme. The theme is marked arietta, little aria. It is gentle, almost naive in its simplicity. But Beethoven transforms it through increasingly complex variations. The music becomes more and more interior, more and more removed from the physical world. By the final variation, the notes are trills and distant echoes, as if the music is dissolving into pure spirit, and he composes string quartets. A commission comes from Prince Nikolai Golitsyn, a Russian aristocrat and music lover. He requests 3 new quartets. Beethoven eventually writes 5. The late string quartets are unlike anything written before or since. They are long, complex, full of strange harmonies and unconventional structures. They do not follow classical rules. They do not concern themselves with pleasing audiences or meeting expectations. They are Beethoven speaking to himself, or perhaps to eternity. String Quartet in E-flat major, Opus 127. It has 6 movements, including 2 slow movements of extraordinary depth. String Quartet in B-flat major, Opus 130. Originally, it had 6 movements. Beethoven replaced the final movement with a new one, publishing the original finale separately as the Grosse Fuge, Great Fugue, Opus 133. The Grosse Fuge is harsh, dissonant, uncompromising. A fugue of massive complexity and intensity. Some consider it Beethoven's greatest achievement. Others find it nearly unlistenable. String Quartet in C-sharp minor, Opus 131. 7 movements played without pause. It begins with a slow fugue. It ends with a fast, almost violent finale. In between, it journeys through territories no music had explored before. String Quartet in a minor, Opus 132. It includes a movement titled Heiliger Dankesang eines Genesenen an die Gottheit, Holy Song of Thanksgiving to the Deity from a Convalescent. Beethoven had been seriously ill. He recovered, and this movement is his gratitude. It is serene, radiant, unearthly. The music seems to exist outside of time. String Quartet in F major, Opus 135. His final completed work. The finale is titled Der schwer gefasste Entschluss, the difficult decision. Above the music, Beethoven wrote, Muss es sein? Es muss sein. Must it be? It must be. The meaning has been debated. Some say it refers to a mundane matter, a debt that Beethoven owed, or perhaps a decision about whether to release the work for publication. Others hear it as philosophical, an acceptance of fate, an acknowledgement that life must continue despite suffering, that art must be completed, that the work must go on. These quartets were not well received at first. Audiences found them difficult, even incomprehensible. Critics called them the confused fantasies of a deaf man. Even musicians struggled with them. One violinist famously said after a rehearsal, "This cannot be music." But Beethoven knew their worth. When someone questioned them, he reportedly said, "They are not for you, but for a later age." He was right. By the end of the 19th century, the late quartets were recognized as masterpieces. By the 20th century, they were revered as perhaps the pinnacle of Western music. Today, they are considered among the greatest achievements in any art form. In December 1826, Beethoven travels to visit his nephew Karl. Karl has joined an infantry regiment stationed in Iglau, about 100 kilometers from Vienna. Beethoven wants to see him, to reconcile after the difficult years. The weather is cold, winter setting in. The journey is difficult, several days by coach over rough roads. Beethoven stays in an unheated inn. He catches a cold. He returns to Vienna in early December, ill. The cold worsens. He develops pneumonia. His abdomen begins to swell with fluid. By January 1827, he is bedridden. Doctors diagnose liver disease, cirrhosis. His liver is failing. The cause is debated. Some blame alcohol. Beethoven drank wine regularly, perhaps heavily in recent years. Others suggest lead poisoning. Lead was common in wine vessels and in medications of the time. Later analysis of Beethoven's hair showed high levels of lead, lending support to this theory. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. His body is filling with fluid. His abdomen swells grotesquely. Doctors perform surgery to drain it. They make an incision and insert a tube. Liters of fluid pour out. The relief is temporary. Within days, the fluid returns. They drain him again. And again. 4 times in total, they puncture his abdomen. Each time, the procedure is agonizing. No anesthesia except wine to dull the pain. And each time, the fluid returns more quickly. Beethoven knows he is dying. He puts his affairs in order. He writes a will designating Karl as his heir. He receives visitors, old friends who come to say goodbye. Some of them have not seen him in years. They are shocked by his appearance. He is gaunt, his skin yellow with jaundice. His eyes are sunken, but his mind is still sharp. He jokes weakly with visitors. He reminisces about old times. He speaks about his music, expressing hope that it will live on. On March the 24th, 1827, a shipment arrives. 40 bottles of wine from the Rheingau region, a gift from his publisher. Beethoven smiles weakly when he is told. He says, "Pity, pity, too late." His last words, or close to them. On March the 26th, 1827, late in the afternoon, a storm rolls over Vienna. Thunder crashes, lightning flashes, heavy rain lashes the windows. Beethoven lies in bed, unconscious now, breathing shallow and irregular. His friend Anselm Hüttenbrenner and a woman from the household are with him. Around 5 in the afternoon, a particularly loud clap of thunder shakes the building. Beethoven's eyes suddenly open. He raises his right arm. His hand clenches into a fist as if in defiance. He holds it there for a moment, suspended. Then his arm falls back to the bed. His body relaxes. His breathing stops. He is gone. Ludwig van Beethoven dies at age 56. The funeral takes place 3 days later, on March the 29th, 1827. It is a massive public event. Schools close throughout Vienna. Shops close their doors. 20,000 people gather in the streets. They line the route from Beethoven's apartment to the Dreifaltigkeitskirche, the Church of the Holy Trinity, where the service is held. From there, the procession continues to the Währing Cemetery on the outskirts of the city. 8 Kapellmeisters, including the young composer Franz Schubert and the pianist Karl Czerny, act as pallbearers, carrying the coffin. Soldiers are needed to control the crowds. At the cemetery, a funeral oration is delivered. The poet Franz Grillparzer wrote it. An actor reads it because Grillparzer is too overcome with emotion. The oration praises Beethoven as a titan among artists. It says he was an artist but also a man in every sense. in the highest. It acknowledges his suffering, his loneliness, his deafness. It declares that his music will live forever. The coffin is lowered into the ground. People weep openly. Musicians, aristocrats, ordinary citizens united in grief. The body is buried in the Waring Cemetery. In 1888, his remains are moved to the Central Cemetery in Vienna, where they rest today alongside Schubert and other musical giants. The grave is marked with a simple obelisk. Many come to pay their respects even now, 2 centuries later. They stand before the stone and remember what he gave to the world. Beethoven's influence on music cannot be overstated. He stands as a bridge between the classical period of Haydn and Mozart and the Romantic period that followed. He showed that music could be personal, that a composer's inner life could be the subject of art. He showed that form could be expanded, that a symphony could be 50 minutes instead of 25. He showed that deafness, isolation, suffering need not end creativity, that the human spirit can transcend any limitation. Every composer who came after him was influenced by him, had to come to terms with his legacy. Franz Schubert revered him, was too shy to approach him during Beethoven's lifetime, but studied his works obsessively. When Schubert died just a year after Beethoven, he asked to be buried near him, and his wish was granted. Johannes Brahms spent decades wrestling with Beethoven's legacy, hesitating to write a symphony because Beethoven had done it so completely. When Brahms finally completed his first symphony, the conductor Hans von Bülow nicknamed it Beethoven's 10th. Richard Wagner heard Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and decided that opera must become a total artwork, music and drama and poetry fused into one. Anton Bruckner wrote massive symphonies that expanded Beethoven's forms even further. Gustav Mahler considered himself Beethoven's heir, writing symphonies that explored philosophical questions and pushed the limits of the genre. Even in the 20th century, Beethoven's presence looms. Igor Stravinsky, who claimed to reject Romanticism, still acknowledged Beethoven's importance. Arnold Schoenberg, who abandoned tonality, still built on Beethoven's principles of motivic development. And beyond classical music, Beethoven's influence extends everywhere. His music appears in films, in advertisements, in popular culture worldwide. The Ode to Joy has become an anthem for humanity. It has been performed at the fall of the Berlin Wall, at the reunification of Germany, at the opening of the Olympics. It is the anthem of the European Union. People who know nothing else about classical music know Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. They know those 4 notes, da-da-da-da-h. They know what they represent. Struggle, persistence, triumph, the refusal to surrender. What did Beethoven give us? He gave us music that speaks directly to the human heart, not in words, but in emotions so immediate that language becomes unnecessary. He gave us proof that the human spirit is indomitable, that creativity can survive even in the face of unimaginable loss. He gave us permission to be ourselves in art, to express our inner lives without apology, to break rules when the truth demands it. He showed that deafness is not silence, that silence can sing, that the music inside us can be louder than any sound in the external world. His influence rippled outward through the 19th century and into the 20th and 21st. The Romantic composers who followed him all worked in his shadow. Mendelssohn conducted revival performances of Beethoven's works. ensuring they remained in the repertoire. Robert Schumann wrote essays praising Beethoven's genius, analyzing his works for a new generation. Franz Liszt made piano transcriptions of Beethoven's symphonies, bringing orchestral works into the drawing room. Hector Berlioz heard Beethoven's symphonies and realized that the orchestra could paint pictures and tell stories. His symphony, Fantastique, owes everything to Beethoven's expansion of what a symphony could be. The late Romantics built cathedrals of sound on Beethoven's foundations. Wagner's music dramas, with their psychological depth and motivic unity, descend directly from Beethoven's procedures. Bruckner's massive symphonies stretch Beethoven's forms to their breaking point. Mahler's symphonies, with their philosophical searching and their use of song quotations, follow paths Beethoven opened. Even composers who rejected Romanticism could not escape Beethoven's influence. The modernists of the 20th century admired his structural rigor, his motivic economy. Schoenberg traced his own 12-tone technique back to Beethoven's method of deriving everything from a single idea. Stravinsky, for all his claims of neoclassicism, absorbed Beethoven's rhythmic power and his ability to build large structures from small motives. And beyond the concert hall, Beethoven's music entered popular consciousness. His Fifth Symphony became a symbol of victory during World War II. The opening rhythm, di-di-di-da, is also the letter Phi in Morse code. V for victory. The Allies used it as a rallying signal. The Ode to Joy became an anthem of unity and peace. It was performed when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, Leonard Bernstein conducting, changing the word Freud, joy, to Freiheit, freedom. It plays at Olympic opening ceremonies. It is the official anthem of the European Union, representing the dream of a united continent. Ordinary people who have never attended a classical concert still know his music. They hear it in films, in advertisements, in public spaces. The opening of the Fifth Symphony is instantly recognizable worldwide. The Moonlight Sonata plays in piano bars and on streaming services. Fürelise is played by children taking their first piano lessons. Beethoven's music has transcended its origins. It no longer belongs only to the concert hall or to educated elites. It belongs to humanity. It speaks a universal language that requires no translation. When people hear Beethoven, they hear struggle and triumph. They hear the refusal to give up. They hear what it means to be human in the face of suffering. And they hear beauty, pure and undeniable, beauty that needs no explanation, that justifies itself by existing. And more than 2 centuries after his death, his music still lives. It still moves us, challenges us, reminds us that we are capable of greatness, that we can endure, that we can create beauty even when surrounded by darkness. The deaf genius who changed music forever never heard his greatest works with his physical ears. But we hear them, and in hearing them, we hear him, still speaking, still defiant, still triumphant, still showing us what it means to be fully human. And so the story of Ludwig van Beethoven comes to rest, not in silence, but in the echoes of music that will never end. If this journey through one man's struggle and triumph helped you find peace tonight, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the Sleeping Tones. There are more stories waiting here, more lives, more music, more quiet explorations of the human spirit. Rest well, dear friend. Let Beethoven's music carry you into sleep. And remember, even in silence, there is song. Good night.